Be'ezrat Hashem, if we can add a little addendum to our last two Divrei Torah on Vezot HaBeracha, where we spoke about the Torah and the Shamayim, the heavenly Torah, which in one of our Torah we spoke about the Eshdat in our parasha of the fiery Torah, which Chazal tell us there was a black fire on a white fire, and then we spoke about how the black fire is kind of like the dio, it's kind of like the ink that comes on the parchment and it holds back, it's the din, it's the gevura that limits and makes boundaries so we can understand the Torah down below, while the white symbolizes the expansiveness, and that's the white fire up above. The Ramban uses this to explain that the heavenly Torah is all names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then in our other Dvar Torah, we spoke about the last 8 Pesukim of the Torah that Moshe Rabbenu wrote B'dema, which according to one approach, B'dema means the exact same thing, the black fire and white fire, the mixture, as the Gaon of Vilna learns, the Dema is a language of a mixture, because it's the mixed letters that correspond to the heavenly Torah, where things are broken up in different kind of ways. And the other approach said B'dema is a language of B'dma'ot, that Moshe Rabbenu wrote in tears, and then we had the whole water concept of the flowing water versus the water that becomes more concrete. Again, this concept of a heavenly Torah versus a lower Torah, and how these last 8 Pesukim in the Torah, if they're written in water, correspond to this higher, pure root, shorish Torah, this Torah Mina Shamayim, meaning the last days of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, or in these last 8 Pesukim, he really was able to be zocheh to the names of Hashem, to the higher Torah. I even saw brought down in Otzar midrashim, there's even one that connects it to the Sha'ar Nun, that he finally makes it in these last 8 letters. And I was actually thinking that the word Shamayim itself, Shamayim, Chazal tells us, is made up of 2 words. It's Esh Umayim. It's this fire and water, and this concept of this heavenly Torah up above, having both of these, what they want on the surface, opposites, but both coming through a very similar mashal of a more holier Torah up in the Shamayim. And it seems to be these last 8 Pesukim that Moshe Rabbenu was writing correspond to this deep Torah. So B'ezrat Hashem, in this Torah, I want to look a little bit deeper into the midrashim that discuss the ink and the water. Actually, on the Gemara itself that says Moshe wrote B'dema, there's a bit of a machloket. Did Moshe Rabbenu write in tears? Meaning, did he literally write with water? We saw in the Ben Ish Chai, he says that it was the day was Shabbat, and therefore Moshe Rabbenu couldn't write in ink, because that would be an Isur of Shabbat. So he actually wrote with liquid, which is only an Isur D'Rabbanan, which didn't exist back then. And then Yoshua came and he filled in the letters afterwards. But other Mefarshim say that can't be. You have to be able to write in ink, because if you don't write in ink, it's not a kosher Sefer Torah. I saw one of the Mefarshim brings down that Moshe Rabbenu, when he was writing about his death, he was crying. And at that point, he then took his quill, he took the kulmus, and he dipped the kulmus in ink and in his tears. So it was a mix of the two. We mentioned in our previous Dvar Torah that maybe when he rubbed that ink over his face that made for his glow, that mixed with his tears. But it seems to be that these last Pesukim either were written only in tears, or they were written in tears mixed with ink. I actually saw one Mefresh, an interesting posek, had a whole long discussion, who says that that Moshe Rabbenu wrote these Torahs, so it actually says, there's midrash that says not only did he write our 8 Pesukim, he wrote 13 Torahs that day, one for each tribe, one for the Aaron. So he's writing all of that on Shabbat. So how can that be? And then we have the Mefarshim they're very perplexed by this. So some want to say no, he really died on Erev Shabbat. Others want to say that he wrote it al pi Kabbalah with the names of God. Others want to say that it's a fascinating pshat, that if you write a Sefer Torah but it doesn't dry yet, are you chayav of Hilchot Shabbat? So there's one opinion that says you're not chayav until it dries. So Moshe Rabbenu, I guess miraculously, writes 13 Torahs. The ink didn't dry yet at all, and then he died. So it's a kosher Torah that he wrote, but he actually never wrote it because he died before it dried, so he didn't break Shabbat. Okay. But I did see one beautiful approach, that if we say that Moshe Rabbenu actually wrote in tears, that he didn't write in ink, so this actually leads to extra ink. So we mentioned in the past the 3 different opinions. Where did the extra ink come from? When Moshe Rabbenu spread the ink on his face, on his head, on his hair, and it made for that glow, the Keren or Panav, that his actual flesh, he was glowing. So one opinion in the Midrash says it came from the extra ink. So the famous question was, where is the extra ink? Actually, the famous approach of the extra ink comes from the small Yud in Anav, that he didn't write the word Yud when he had to write. He was so humble, he didn't want to write that he was humble, so Hashem let him not write the small Yud. So I actually saw beautifully the idea of Yud is also as a symbol to Olam Haba, and this is the Torah of the Olam Haba. This is the Torah of the Shamayim. Actually, the other opinion that says that it's a small Aleph, that would also work that way. But I saw one opinion that says if he's writing these last 8 Pesukim in tears, so ink wasn't used up. That's the extra ink. The extra ink that makes Moshe Rabbeinu's glow, even though the timeline's a little bit hard over here, because he got this glow after he fixed the sin of the Chet HaEgel. When he brought tshuva, that's when he already had the glow. But Hashem already knows that in the future, these last 8 Pesukim are not going to need ink. So when he gets to the very end and there's no ink left, it's okay, because now we have tears, because everything works out in the cosmic timeline. But the actual extra ink would be from these 8 Pesukim, and these 8 Pesukim are going to correspond to the Torah Shabbat, which we see that Moshe Rabbenu can't write down clearly for us. I mean, Yeshua has to break it up to a way we can understand, as we said. It's going to be the glow, it's going to be the internal Moshe Rabbenu reaching those sodot, but not necessarily that we have it down below. Okay, fine. So I want to speak a little bit more about this glow, though, and where this glow came from. And let's go back to the midrashim, because I think we'll have a lot of cool ideas that'll come out of it. Okay, so I want to start with the midrash Tanchuma. Says the Midrash Tanchuma, Vahi beredet Moshe Maharsene. This is back on Kitisa, Siman Lamed Zayin, the very last section in the Midrash Tanchuma on Kitisa, when Moshe comes down with the second luchot after he brought teshuvah for the egel. Moshe lo yada ki karan. Moshe Rabbenu didn't know that he was glowing. Minayin zacha Moshe lekarne ahod. From where did Moshe Rabbenu get his rays, his glow of hod, of glory? So Moshe Rabbenu has these rays of glory. Actually, I saw an interesting idea of this language of Karnei Hod. So says Rabbi Yitzhak Demin Ako in his Sefer Me'irat Einayim. Me'irat Einayim is a sefer that gives explains the Sodot of the Ramban. So at the very end of Kitisa, even though the Ramban doesn't speak about this, he adds it in there. What does this mean that Moshe Rabbenu had kirun or? Shamati al kirun or pnei Moshe. Ki karan or pnei Moshe. I saw discussing this concept that Moshe Rabbeinu's skin was glowing. Mipnei ma lo amar ki heiru pnei Moshe. Why didn't it just say that Moshe Rabbeinu's skin, his face, was heiru, from language of light, that the or was coming out? Why does it say the language of a Karen? Since the Jewish people sinned with the egel. Now, what was the sin of the egel? So we mentioned this once in the past. Why did the Jewish people pick an egel to be a sin? What is that all about? And we also discussed in the past that the egel kind of corresponds to one of the keruvim. We have keruvim on the right side, keruvim on the left side. So we mentioned once in the past that the keruv on the right side was more of the image of an Adam in the Holy Merkava, and the chariot they saw in the Shamayim, and that's why the keruvim in the Beit HaMikdash corresponded to in the Mishkan corresponded to this image of an Adam, like a little child. But on the left side we have the image of the shore. On the left side, the Gvura side, we have the shore. So it says the Me'irat Einayim, Sheshamu kavanatam b'dat hahod lamshich hakoch mimena ala egel. So he says the Jewish people had put all of their faith in the midah of hod. Now, when you have the different Kabbalistic midot, it's beyond the scope of this Torah. But on the left side you have gvura, and on the left side you also have hod, and on the left side you have the image of the shore of the Abba Egel. Ki magvura neratzim v'haya b'smol devihi b'smol. It says basically Me'irat Einayim, the Jewish people's sin came from the left side. They thought Moshe on the right side had died. Now we got to go Aaron, who's now going to be on the left side. So now we got to be on the side of the left, which deals with Hod, which deals with ox, which deals with Egel. Upnei shor me'asmol. Moshe Rabbenu alav hashalom kina aleim lechvod hamidah, v'levichach ba ashor v'nagach bekarno b'panav shel Moshe. But now what happens? Moshe Rabbenu came and then fought for them. He fought for the Jewish people. He brought tshuva for them, and he's bringing tshuva for their sin on the left side, and so to speak, spiritually, symbolically, the shore itself, this ox comes and attacks v'nagach bekarno, attacks with his horns the face of Moshe Rabbenu. But this is really a zechut for Moshe Rabbenu. V'zeh mashal al nitzot ziv zohar hoda bahir shepagau baksha bepanav shel Moshe latetz scharo meshalem. And he says that's the idea that now this when the Egel comes face to face with Moshe Rabbenu, and Moshe Rabbenu basically wins this battle and brings us to Shuvah. So the Karen, the horn of the Egel, is now going to lead on the left side, which is the side of the Hod. Now brings the Karnei Hod, these rays of Hod, of glory, of splendor, of grandeur to Moshe Rabbenu. It's exactly like a midah keneged midah, because he brought the Tshuva keneged the Egel. Okay, so we see over here from this Me'irat Einayim that a bit of this glow of Moshe Rabbenu is coming. We know it comes because of the egel, but it comes because of the sin. It comes because of the left side. Now, I was beginning to wonder, Moshe Rabbenu now has this glow. Now, we're going to get to the other opinion that says that the glow came from the ink. Now, we know the ink is black. It's gvura. It's the left side, but Moshe Rabbenu is glowing, and then that's like light, and that's like the light side. So I was like wondering, what is going on over here? Do we have? Isn't light supposed to be white and ink is black? What's really happening over here? So I saw brought down in the Shla Kadosh. It's also based. I saw it's also sourced to our Ramak. But the Shla writes that why do we have this concept of like wearing white on Shabbat? And also when Moshe Rabbenu, when he served in the Mishkan the first 7 days of the Yemei Miluim of the inauguration of the temple, Moshe acted as the Kohen. Chazal tells us he wore a chaluk lavan. He wore a white garment, like the white garments of the Kohen Gadol that he wears on Yom Kippur, like what the simple Kohanim wear. Why the white? So he says the white, which is a symbol of purity, of rachamim, of chesed. It's symbolic of the Keren Or. It's symbolic of the light that's coming out of Moshe Rabbenu. So we have this idea like the white seems to be symbolizing this white, the color white. But now we're saying it's coming from the left side. It's coming from the Keren. It's coming from the black ink. So shouldn't that be Gvura? Like what kind of light are we talking about over here? And I actually think maybe if we go look at the midrash, maybe we can perceive that this might even be a machloka. Again, I'm saying ulai over here because I'm playing with deep ideas. I saw the mefarshim of these midrashim say the stuff here is such deep sodot, such deep ideas that we really can't fully understand what's going on. But it's like it was bothering me a little bit. Like, is he doing white? Is he doing black? Like, what's actually happening? So let's look at the Midrash Tanchuma. So it says, "Vahi bered Moshe mehar Sinai, uMoshe lo yada ki karan." Moshe Rabbenu did not know that he was glowing. Minayin zacha Moshe the karnei hod. Where did he get these rays of hod from? These rays of splendor. Amru Rabbeinu zucharim say the rabbis, Min hame'ara. He got them from the cave. Shneimar vaya ba'avor kevodi v'samticha b'nikrat hatzur. I actually started looking into this Dvar Torah over Shabbat Chol HaMoed, because on Shabbat Chol HaMoed on Sukkot we read in the Torah reading we read from these Pesukim. And these are the Pesukim of the second Luchot, the Pesukim of the 13 Midot Rachamim. It's the Pesukim where Moshe Rabbenu asks HaKadosh Baruch Hu, can I see your front? And Hashem says, you can't see my front or else you're going to die. You're not going to make it over here. And there's this imagery of Hashem covering over him in the shade. So even though the very end of the Aliyot, the very last Aliyah references Chag Asif, it references Sukkot, it references Pesach, which makes sense why this is a Chol HaMoed Torah reading. But I was wondering, maybe also the beginning of the parasha speaks about this great revelation that Moshe is asking for, and Hashem's going to give it to him, and it's going to create this glow on Moshe's face, and it's going to relate to Hashem covering over, making a shade over Moshe Rabbenu. That seems to be a schach sukkah connection. Okay, but says over there. Says the Midrash, Natan HaKadosh Baruch Hu kaf yado alav umisham zacha lekarnei ahod. So says the Midrash, the first approach, when Hashem, so to speak, told Moshe Rabbenu, go into that cave, stay by that tzur, stay by that rock. We spoke a lot about rock and ha'azinu. Stay by the rock, and then Hashem covers himself with it, with his hands, covers Moshe Rabbenu with his kaf yado, so to speak, this shade, this schach of Moshe Rabbenu. This is what's going to lead to the karnei hod, to the glow of Moshe Rabbenu. And then the Midrash gives a pasuk to try to prove that point. Then, next opinion. V'yesh omrim shebasha'a shaya Kadosh Baruch Hu melamdot Torah, when Hashem was teaching Torah to Moshe Rabbenu, mitzotzot shetzu mipi hashchina natar karnei hod. Do you want to know where the glow of Moshe Rabbenu came from? When Hashem was teaching him Torah, there was the nitzotzot, the so to speak, the vapor, the little spittle. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu was talking to him, that breath of Hashem, that was like sparks that got onto Moshe Rabbeinu's face, so to speak, and that led to the glow. Now, I thought that was a really beautiful idea, because we were speaking about in our Sukkot Devar Torah the importance of good speech, not speaking Lashon Hara in the Sukkah, speaking divrei Torah, divrei Kedusha in the Sukkah, because from our vapor, from our neshima, from our breath, we create the Gishmei Bracha, the good clouds in the Ananei HaKavod. We're trying to create and seed them with a really good bracha that's going to come about. So here we see that the great glow of Moshe Rabbenu was coming from the breath, so to speak, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Nudati, I really think, even though, again, I don't know, it's not fully clear to me how to make the timeline work out well, but when Moshe's Alal Marom, when Moshe goes up to the Shamayim to learn the secrets of the Torah, to learn the Torah about crowning the letters, crowning that black fire we spoke about in our earlier Dvar Torah, this is probably the charuta that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was having with Moshe Rabbenu. Now, it's true, Hashem is having a charuta with Moshe Rabbenu all throughout. So even the earlier charuta already led to that glow. But the real glow, when it says Moshe Allah Marom, when Moshe is going up to the heavens, which yes, he's going up to get the Torah, but maybe we could also see in that Gemara when he's being old, because he's constantly going up to get the Torah. He's constantly, so to speak, learning from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Allah Marom is also a language of when he's dying, in this last day of his life, when he's learning these final 8 Pesukim, sitting in the 8th row of Rabbi Akiva's Beit Midrash, he's finally grasping it now with the real breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give that real glow to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. But let's go on. So that's the opinion that it's the breath of Hashem that gives him the shine. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman Amar haluchot or kan shishat tfachim v'rachban shloshat tfachim v'aya Moshe machzik b'shnei tfachim v'akadosh baruch hu b'shnei tfachim. The luchot were 6 tfachim long. Moshe Rabbenu, Hashem held on to one side. Moshe Rabbenu held on to the other side. And there was a middle open area in the middle. Misham natal Moshe karnei ahod. And it's from that middle part that Moshe Rabbenu got the karnei hod, that the light that came from the middle. And the Mefarshim explain on this that there's a part of the Torah that's always so far away that we can never grasp it. Then there's the part that we could grasp, that's what Moshe has, and then there's that part in the middle. And even from that part in the middle, which seems a little bit too high for us, a little bit greater than us, there Moshe Rabbenu can get that light as well. I actually think that this is very much a very similar mashal to the mashal of Moshe Rabbenu seeing Hashem crowning the letters. That there's the letters that we can grasp, and then there's the crown, the part that's right on top. But even that, there's a Rabbi Akiva, and as we're trying to say now, Moshe Rabbenu on the last day of his life, even those crowns we can get, and the light can come from that extra ink there as well. That extra ink that's pointing to the Shamayim, that's the ticket to bring us back up to Ramosh Olam. Even from over there we can get it. But now I was thinking, if we take those two ideas, it's a similar concept, except in the case of the luchot, the stone, and the stone seems to be more like white, while the ink and the crowns, that's black. So meaning maybe the question is, where is this light coming from? Is it coming from the black or is it coming from the white? And then the Midrash gives the final approach. As Moshe was writing the Torah, there was a little bit of extra ink over there. And that's where the karnei hod comes from. And that's the shot of the ink. So returning to this idea, did Moshe Rabbeinu's light come from the white or from the ink? Where's it coming from? So I actually saw from a mystical sefer called Sefer Harazim. I saw this quote. I didn't see it inside, but it speaks about the malachim. It speaks about the angels. Tovlim benahar tahara mitatfin kesut esh levana. We see that the angels wear this white fire garments. We're talking about where does light come from? Where does the white garment? We mentioned the Shlach Kadosh brings down that we wear white on Shabbat. Moshe Rabbenu wore a chaluk that was white to symbolize the karnei or the karnei hod. So it seems to be that this concept of his or with an ayin becoming an or with an aleph, becoming light. So we see where the angels, according to this one source, it's coming from the white fire. It's coming from the esh levana. But then I saw in Rabbeinu B'Hayeh, so Rabbeinu B'Hayeh doesn't learn that. Rabbeinu B'Hayeh learns, now this is Rabbeinu B'Hayeh in Kitisa, over there. So V'hine Karan or Panav, Minea or Halukim. He says there's different types of light. There's two main types of light. Yesh or Chokhmah. There's the light of Chokhmah. V'yesh or Sheyatza Min HaChoshech. And then there's light that comes from Choshech. Or Chokhmah hu or shebo nivra hakol. Zal kavar haya. So he speaks about there was this great light, the or that was hidden away for the tzaddikim, latid lavo, the or ganuz. Or. He speaks about a light that existed before there was even light in the world. There's like a greater, more spiritual light. And he says Moshe Rabbenu reached this level of this light of Chokhmah that predates the world, but that was internal in his heart. Or sheyatza min hachoshech, but the light that came out of the darkness, hu esh hayesodi hu nikra ha'or hamurgash v'hu asher chala Moshe v'karan or panav. That is the or that came from the choshech. Whatever this means, this is beyond the scope of what I understand. But it seems to be saying that the esh shechora, the black ink, that's what's making this glow. It's coming from the choshech. That it's a light that's coming from a darkness. So we mentioned it's a question. The black fire is that the black fire just means that there's no white fire there. It's a holding back of the white, or is it its own creation? We mentioned from the Ramachal that the black fire itself, choshech itself, according to certain Rishonim, is its own kind of creation. That would work very well with Rabbeinu B'Hayeh right now. That Moshe Rabbenu is getting a light through a more concealed fire, a black fire, and that's where it's actually coming from, and that would be the dio. And I wonder, maybe we could say there's a little bit of machloket between those two opinions. Is it coming from the middle of the luchot? Is that where the sodot come from? Or is it coming from the crowns of the letters, from the black or for the white? Maybe we could have a machloket there. Or maybe I was thinking we could say a little bit different. If the extra light that's coming on Moshe Rabbeinu's face is coming from the ink, but it's the ink that was never written, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu never wrote that part of the Torah down with ink. He wrote it with tears, according to this approach. Or according to the other approach where he wrote it, maybe ink was there too. He never spoke it out. It never came out Torah Sheba'al Peh. He never actually brought it out into the world in that kind of way. But it could be that this ink, if it really didn't fully come out in its fully revealed form yet, Moshe Rabbeinu is getting a version of the ink before it became black. Maybe he's getting a bit of that white white fire. He's getting the fire before it became contracted and concealed into a darker fire, before it became the actual ink that he could write onto the parchment. He got that earlier form of it when it was still more bedema, when it's still more liquid form. It hasn't congealed just yet. So maybe the whole concept of the white fire and the black fire, who says they're different parts? Maybe it's the white fire congealing into a black fire. Moshe's getting it at an earlier stage, and therefore that's where his light is coming from. Now, says the Midrash Rabbah, this is in Parsha Kitisa, Perek Mem Zayin, Ot Siman Vav. So here it brings down the same opinions in the Tanchuma. It actually does not mention the opinion of the breath of Hashem, but it closes again with our idea of the ink in the quill, the extra ink that Moshe Rabbenu rubbed on his face. So the Etz Yosef over there explains that this is hinting to us that the original Torah was made of a parchment of fire, written in fire, and the extra ink that goes to Moshe Rabbenu made this glow. Says the Etz Yosef, what's the kavanah? What does this mean? It says the hidden deep Torah that's hinted to in the Torah, the deep ideas. It says that the deepest ideas, they can't come down in writing. They stayed hidden inside the quill itself. And this Moshe Rabbeinu was able to, on his own, be able to grasp. He's able to reach this panim of Hashem, this depths of Hashem, the Sharnun. He's able to get it. And this is where the glow came from, because the Chokhmah brings light to a person. But it wasn't something that he could write down. It wasn't something that he could reveal. It was something more for himself. Okay, that's the Etz Yosef. Now, in the Perush, Be'ur Maharif, so he brings down, it says, the Pasuk says, Moshe lo yada. Moshe himself didn't know that he got this glow. He says, why did Moshe not know? So he says, because this is showing us how real and amiti Moshe Rabbenu was. When he took that quill and he was wiping it on his head and his face, he wasn't doing it to get a glow. He didn't even know he got the glow. Moshe Rabbenu was so honest. He wanted to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He wanted to sit by the Shekhinah and bask in the Ziv of Shekhinah. Moshe Rabbenu had this deep desire to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was real, it was amiti, and he wasn't doing it for the glow, because he didn't even realize he had a glow. And that's what the Torah says. He didn't even know. This was just the natural purity of Moshe Rabbenu was what led to him being zocheh to this great level. Now, the Imre Yosher on the Midrash, so he notes that we see that the glow really only comes from the second luchot. Now, we spoke a lot about this in the past, that it's coming from, really, we now have the extra ink, we have the Torah Sheba'al Peh that's no longer on those first luchot. It's the crowns of the Jewish people, the jewelry of the Jewish people that was given to Moshe Rabbenu. It's the tshuva that brings you closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's the more lo shablo b'shamayim. We give a lot of approaches for this, the second one being what was coming down. Although it seems to be that the Imre Yosher, it's not so clear. Maybe there was a glow that was originally there with Moshe Rabbenu, and maybe afterwards it was lost. He also kind of brings down, he says that machloket, was it coming from the middle of the luchot, or was it coming from the ink? He says it could be that that by the second luchot, when it says that Moshe had to create it, he created those stones, it could be that they weren't necessarily engraved, that the second luchot came more with ink. I'm not sure exactly how that works out, because there was stones there too, but it seems to be that maybe it's a machloket, that the original part is holding on to the bottom of the luchot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving you, while the second one is that the second luchot is Moshe Rabbenu joining with Hashem to actually write it, and maybe in that joining in, that's where the actual glow is going to come from. But in the Perush Maharzu, he says, wait a second, there's one more midrash that talks about this, and he says, and check out my Perush in that midrash. So I want to jump to this midrash. This is in Dvarim Rabbah. This is in Parashat Ekev, Perek Gimel, in Siman Yud Bet, and this one even gives us another opinion of where that glow came from. Okay, so says the midrash. So the Midrash here is kind of saying that Moshe gets a sachar for being that Moshe Rabbenu, that middleman, that special, I guess, like Shushvinin for a Kadosh Baruch Hu, the one who's going out of his way to write the shtar, give us the Torah. Moshe Rabbenu gets a special a kavod for that. So it says the Midrash as follows. ויכתוב משה את התורה הזאת, ומה שכר נתן לו הקדוש ברוך הוא? What was the sachar that Moshe Rabbenu got for writing the Torah, for teaching the Torah, for giving us the Torah? Says the Midrash, Ziva Panim, that Hashem gave him a sachar of this glow, dichtiv, Moshe lo yada ki karan or panav. Moshe did not know that his skin, his or, was glowing. Interesting also, you should note, that it's talking about the or with an ayin. We always speak about the ketonet or versus the ketonet or. We have ourselves the original garment that Adam HaRishon had that was with an aleph, that he was just that glow, and then the garment that Hashem gave him with an ayin, which is the actual leather. I actually saw the word keren or with an ayin is ayin vav resh, is also the same letter, says Shlach Kadosh as iver. There's a certain blindness that after there was sin, there was a certain blindness in that ketonet or. Even though Hashem gave us a special leather garment to cover ourselves, to give us kavod, it was still more of a blind one than the original one, which was the ketonet or with an olive. Okay. And when did he get it? Eimatai, says the midrash, bidabro ito, when Hashem spoke to him. I guess this might be a hint to what we saw in the Tanchuma, that's the neshima, the breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the nitzotzot of Hashem, gave him the glow. Amar Reish Lakish, b'sha'ah shekatav Torah, natal Moshe ziva panim. Now says Reish Lakish, when he got the glow? He got it when he wrote the Torah. Ketzad, Amar Reish Lakish, he explains, HaTorah shenital leMoshe, the Torah that Moshe got, Orah shel esh, it's parchment. The or with an ayin was with orah shel esh levana, was made with a white fire. Uktuva be'esh shechora, and it was written with a black fire. The hatuma be'esh umelupepet be'esh, and it was signed, it was sealed with esh. We'll see what that means in a second. Umelupepet be'esh, and also we'll see what that means in a second. Ve'im shekotev kinech et kakos v'saro umishal natal ziva panim. And then as he was writing it, again, like we said, he cleaned his quill on his hair, and that's where the ziv came from. Now the midrash gives one more opinion. This one going back to the luchot, but a little bit different than we saw in the other midrashim. Says Reb Shmuel bar Nachman Amar, min haluchot natal Moshe ziva panim. Moshe Rabbenu got it from the luchot. Im shenitnu lo haluchot mikapayim lekapayim misham natal ziva panim. You want to know where his glow came from? When Hashem handed it over, hand to hand, he gave that kaf. We mentioned that when Moshe Rabbenu was in the Me'ara, Hashem took his kaf, took this, so to speak, this metaphoric hand and covered him with the shade. Now we're saying a little different. Now we're saying when Hashem hands over, hand to hand, that handshake. We always talk about the power of touch, the magic touch. The reason why we're showing Agirka's touch is so powerful. The touch of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbenu, that's what gave him his glow. But then the Midrash says that when the Jewish people did that sin, they did Egel HaZahav, Netalan v'Shiberan, Moshe Rabbenu had to break it, meaning the next transfer over hand to hand, Moshe Rabbenu, the smicha, Moshe to the Jewish people, that couldn't happen, and Moshe Rabbenu has to break it, and then it sounds like at that point, he loses it, and the Midrash goes on, Hashem says, now Moshe Rabbenu, you yourself have to write it, and then it seems like it comes back. So according to this Midrash over here, it seems to be that maybe he had the glow a little in the beginning, but then he loses it. Okay, but let's go back to this concept, because this midrash is beautiful, because it's really telling us that the glow itself is coming from this black fire and white fire, because that was the original Torah that Moshe is even bringing down. I saw some of Farshim have to explain that we don't really know what's going on over here, and we have to take these things as mashalim, because we realize Moshe Rabbenu had to come down with a literal Torah, because there was an actual Torah. But what is it? What does this mean? So says the Etz Yosef over here. It means to tell us the Torah that Hashem gave Moshe la'atik mimena, that Hashem is now telling Moshe Rabbenu, copy from my Torah. Hayta kula shel esh. It was all from fire, and he explains over in the brackets. He says that this concept of fire is a mixture of Torah shebechtav with Torah sheba'al peh, Mikra, Mishnah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Gemara, all together. V'advarim amukim misitrei Torah b'sodoteya. This stuff is like the deepest stuff that we really, really can't understand. So he said that the parchment was white fire, the writing was in black fire, and then it said that it was chatum, it was sealed with fire, which lanu dati, I think the word sealed with fire refers to these last 8 Pesukim. I mean, the closing, the chatima, the signature at the very end are these last 8 Pesukim. So if we go the way that the Gaon Vilna says in our previous Dvar Torah that it was written b'dimua, it was written with the mixing of the letters, that is the black fire and the white fire. That's the chatima be'esh. I mean, the very end also is a certain extra level of just esh, because it's only shemot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Baruch Shekivanti, I found it in Imre Yosher. We'll read that in a second. And then it says it's melufefet. What is melufefet? So according to the Etz Yosef, melufefet means umechuberet al yedei chutei tefira. Melufefet means that it's tied together. It's where you sew the different parchments. So if you have these parchments of white fire, but it's different parchments together. We don't have one big long parchment. So too apparently with the white fire as well. It's different sections to the white fire. So they are tied together with strings of fire as well. Again, there's probably some really deep ideas going on there as well. Although I did see another approach that says that, what does it mean, melufefet? It means that the covering, the Torah, the mantle, the cover, the kisui, the kis, the garment that covers the Torah, that also was made of fire. So I saw that as a different approach. Okay, comes along the Imre Yosher on this midrash. Now he says beautifully. He says the first approach that says Moshe Rabbenu gets it as a sachar. He says why? Because he was the sofer. We know Moshe Rabbenu is the sofer down below, and the sachar of being the scribe of the Torah that gives him the ziva panim. Okay, but Amar Reish Lakish Tam Acher. But now Reish Lakish's approach was a little different. So here he says, what's that all about? He says, Ba'et shekatav HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote a sefer Torah up above to teach Moshe Rabbenu how to write a Torah. Meaning Moshe Rabbenu is going to copy his Torah from Hashem's Torah. So he says, what's that story all about? So he takes us to our Gemara. We've been speaking about so much these last couple of weeks that Moshe Rabbenu matza'au lakadosh baruch hu kosher ketarim shua tagin. So what was going on? That Hashem is crowning the letters in the Torah, that famous Gemara we've been speaking about. That's mamash happening right now. That's what's going on, and that's where we see the black fire and the white fire. Meaning, we brought this down in the name of the Maharal, so we see the Imre Yosher says the same idea. What was that original fire? Which Torah was Moshe looking at when he copied our Torah? He was looking at a Torah that was made of fire, and that's our midrash. Our midrash now was saying, Keitzad Haita, or Rashu Agvil Esh Levana. He says that the parchment was white fire. The Hatuma Be'esh. Now, what does it mean that it was signed, it was sealed in fire? Hainu Hagilion Shachara Siyum. He says, at the end of the Torah, there's some extra parchment at the end. So on this white fire up above, there was also extra parchment, and there's Esh there as well. Don't think that the extra parchment at the end of our Torah, now he's saying we're going to learn about the Kedusha of our Torah from the Kedusha of Hashem's Torah. So Hashem's Torah above as well had extra parchment. It had a Chatima, and that itself is holy. Or it's referring to the 8 Pesukim at the end of the Torah. Even these last 8 Pesukim, you might even think somebody else wrote it, because how could Moshe Rabbenu, how could you think that Moshe Rabbenu wrote about his death? It's our Gemara we've been talking about. You should know, no, these last 8 Pesukim, the seal, the signature, that is also Esh Shechora. Inami, or he says Chatuma Perush ala Tagin. Or he says maybe the Chatima, this last signature at the end, the last seal, is what's taking Hashem so long to give us the Torah. It's the crowns that Hashem is adding on. I guess it's kind of like sparks of fire, the nitzotzot that are coming out of the letters. These Tagin correspond to the black fire. Umelufefet be'esh, or Perusho ala Yeriyah she'ha'ochez Sefer Torah arum nikbar arum, or ala otiyot b'fot aminu zarot afu haya be'esh shechora. So he says it's either talking about that the covering of the Torah. You can't have yourself a naked Torah. You have to cover it with something. You have to have a nice little case for it. Or it's talking about there's certain letters that are called melufafot or menuzarot. These are the backwards nuns of the Torah. In old Sifrei Torah, we don't have it so much today, but there were certain letters that had little squigglies inside of the letters themselves. They were like cool little shapes to the letters. That also avuaya be'esh shechora. That's also the black fire, and he explains, and that's going to be the extra ink that Moshe is going to put on his face, and that's going to give him the glow. It's really from all these parts of the Torah, these letters of the Torah. And then he says, V'yesh mefarshim ala sodot, and he says, no, it's the secrets. The kavanah is that Moshe Rabbenu himself personally understood ideas that he couldn't write down, and that's the stuff right now that's making him the glow, this like inner sodot Torah that he can't reveal to us completely, but that made him give him his glow. Okay, that was the Imre Yosher, but I want to close now with the Pirush Maharzu, because he's the one that told us back on the main midrash in Kitisa. Oh, check out what I wrote over here, because I have some deep stuff. Okay, so says the Pirush Maharzu. So he writes, this is as we know in our parasha where it says, Memino esh dat lamo, shadat shnatan lanu beyamenu hu ya Torah tashel esh. He says, this is again the hint that the Torah was written in fire. And it's similar to our ubidimion sifrei Torah shelanu, and it's like a spiritual image of our Torah down below. She'ora lavan, that the parchment is white, vidio shachor, and the ink is black. And he says, what does it mean chatuma be'esh? What does it mean that it's signed in esh? Ulaya kavana al chatuma parashiyot shaya basiman nikar ba'esh. He says, it could be that at the end of every parsha there was some kind of a fire that came out to recognize that was the end of the parsha. Today we have on most parshas we have a little bit of a space that separates parshiot. Or he says, maybe the language of Chatima is that Hashem hid into it, He signed into it, He sealed into it some hidden secrets. And I guess that's kind of like the idea of the tagin that we saw in the Imre Yosher, that Hashem is hiding stuff in there, but it's in there as well. And then he gives the two interpretations of melufafot, is that it's either tied together with so to speak, like these strings of fire, or that it's covered with a kis. It's covered with a sudar shel esh, that it's like the outer garment that covers our Torah. That was also made out of fire. And then he also goes on to explain again, even though these things are berumo shel olam, they're such deep and hidden secrets, we can't take away from the pshat. We can't take away from the simple interpretation that Moshe got a Torah in the Shamayim that's similar to our Torah that we can understand. And he says this is similar to the idea that when the malachim, the angels, come to speak to us in the Torah, they're coming in the form of man. So there is this level of we can relate to it as well. So even though the malachim themselves are also made out of esh, they're also made out of fire, they can come down to us in a way we can understand it. So to the fiery Torah that was given to Moshe Rabbenu can now be understood to us in the way that we have a parchment, an actual literal leather parchment or a hide parchment of white and black ink that's tied together with the gidin, with the sinews of the animals, and covered nicely with a beautiful kisui. And our Torah, so to speak, now is going to correspond, be similar in image to the Torah that Moshe Rabbenu saw that was made of fire. But then the Maharzul says something really deep, and I want to close with these last ideas that he's saying. He says that, okay, but what is this concept of the white fire and the black fire? We know about Torah Chesed. We know about a Torah of kindness. We also know that Kadosh Baruch Hu at times is called by Chazal as Rachmana, the one who's merciful one. At other times we see that the Torah was given Mipia Gvura, from the mouth of the strong one, and Gvura, which is the more side of Emet, the more side of Din and Gvura. So like, what is it? Is it the Chesed side? Is it the Din side? So he says that's the difference between the white and the black. He says that the or lavan, the white parchment, romez al pashtuta chesed, that's the kindness below gvul. It goes. The Hasidim jump on this idea, and they explain that the parchment where things aren't bounded anymore, it just goes and goes, and it's shefa and it flows. That's the white. Below gvul, no boundaries, and no tzimtzum, no holding back. It's a white fire, but at times that could be way too bright, and that too much can blind us. I actually heard once the concept of sagi nahor, that a blind person is called someone who has like so much light that really it's not that he can't see. It's that there's so much light, the light is blinding. There's no boundaries to it. But v'dio shahor, but the black ink, that's romez aladin, and now we have letters, now we have boundaries, vatzimtzum, shel parshiot, psukim, tevot, v'otiyot, everything is now we have letters, we have words, we have understanding, we bounded things make sense. It's no longer just free flowing, but we have ideas. Umakom shel tikbor tadin bator, and he says, so the ink creates boundaries. But then he says something very fascinating. He says there's one part in the Torah where there's tikbor hadin batorah, where there was like major din, there was major justice, major strictness, a tough part of the Torah, etzel ha'egel. He says by the egel, there was a lot of din. Shamar hanicha li v'achalem, because Hashem wanted to destroy us. Ve'az nitlachecha kumos b'dio yoter midai. Now I have to find this midrash. I'm not sure where he's basing this off of. I couldn't find the source over here. But he says that in this cheta egel, there was so much ink. Why was there so much ink? Because there was so much din. Because Jewish people were messing up big time with the sin of the avodah zarah, the egel zahav. So he says there was so much ink. Moshe Rabbenu couldn't keep writing at this point because it was going to smudge. It was going to make the quill itself had gotten dirty. The kulmos nitlachech. So what did he do? And he needed to cancel the din. So that it's at that point that he puts it on his hair and he puts it on his face, and then that's where the glow came from. So what a beautiful idea. There was so much din. Now what does it mean that Moshe Rabbenu takes the kulmus and he takes the quill and he puts it against his face? This is Moshe Rabbenu saying, Hashem, I want to hold back this din. It's as he says, he tells Hashem, erase me from this Torah. Let's take out more words from the Torah. I don't want to be here anymore. Take me out of it. Again, we have all this extra ink. If Moshe Rabbenu is not part of the Torah, if we erase every Moshe Rabbenu, so forget the last 8 Pesukim, the amount of Moshes in the Torah, we'll erase all of those. There'll be so much extra ink over there. This is the idea right now. There's so much ink. There's so much din. There's so much guvulot, so much boundaries. Hashem, you want to punish the Jews? No, please don't do it. Let me take away a little bit of this din. Erase me from the Torah. Let's get rid of some of the ink. There's too much din over here. We need a little more white. We need a little bit more chesed. And that's when he rubs the dirty quill metaphorically on his face, and from that point, that's where the actual glow comes from. So Baruch Hashem, we saw a lot of ideas in these Divrei Torah, but you see this like this deep link that ultimately is this love of Moshe Rabbenu to try to get rid of the Din, to try to get rid of the black, to try to save the Jewish people. It's the Karnei Hod, it's the Karen of the ox, of the Egel that's trying to come and attack Moshe Rabbenu. But Moshe Rabbenu is fighting for us. He's stepping it up and he's saying, I don't even need a Torah. It's not worth it. Get rid of all the letters. Get rid of me. But all that extra ink, all that stepping it up, he then puts it on himself. He puts that Esh Shechorah, that black fire, or maybe that white fire according to different approaches, but he's taking that and putting it on himself, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, wow, you are awesome. And now all those sodot, all those secrets, all those tagin, all of that fire, I'm actually putting into you right now, Moshe Rabbenu, and now you're going to glow. Chag Sameach.